Look closely at the stone resting on the black velvet pad. It is a 1-carat, round, brilliant-cut, flawless diamond. Under a jeweler's loupe, it bends light with absolute perfection. A master gemologist cannot distinguish it from a stone pulled from the earth in Botswana or the frozen tundra of Canada. It is pure carbon, arranged in a rigid crystalline lattice. The natural stone sitting next to it costs $8,000. This exact replica costs $800. The seller is not a counterfeiter. The seller is De Beers. For over a century, De Beers operated as the ultimate monopoly, a cartel that ruthlessly controlled the global supply of rough diamonds to engineer artificial scarcity and keep prices astronomical. Yet here they are, intentionally setting fire to their own pricing model. This is not a clearance sale. It is a calculated assassination attempt. In corporate economics, this maneuver is known as a fighter brand. It is a product engineered to take a massive loss or operate on razor-thin margins, entirely to destroy a new class of competitors. When technology allowed industrial manufacturers to literally print perfect diamonds in a laboratory, the monopoly faced an existential threat. You cannot hoard what can be infinitely manufactured. So De Beers made a counterintuitive choice. They decided to manufacture them too, and price them so aggressively cheap that no startup could survive the margin compression. They wanted to signal to the market that lab-grown diamonds are cheap trinkets, fashion jewelry, a fun accessory for a Tuesday, not the eternal symbol of love. They attempted to build a psychological firewall between real investments and fake commodities. But market design is a dangerous game. When an apex predator intentionally crashes the price of a substitute good, they assume their core customer will refuse the substitute. De Beers assumed wrong. The $800 wrecking ball did not just crush the lab-grown competitors. It swung back and shattered the century-old illusion that any diamond is inherently valuable.
To understand why a monopoly would sabotage its own product category, you have to understand how the product gained its extreme value in the first place. Diamonds are not particularly rare. In the late 19th century, massive diamond pipes were discovered in South Africa. The financiers backing the mines realized a terrifying economic truth. If they simply mined and sold everything they found, the market would flood. The price would collapse to the cost of extraction. The stone would become a common industrial commodity. The solution was the syndicate. Cecil Rhodes, and later the Oppenheimer family, consolidated control over nearly all global production. They created a single channel through which diamonds flowed to the market. They bought up independent mines. They stockpiled stones in London vaults during recessions. They literally locked supply in briefcases to ensure demand always outpaced availability. But controlling supply is only half the equation. You must also control demand. In 1947, De Beers hired the NWA advertising agency to solve a specific problem. People were buying smaller diamonds or skipping them entirely during the post-war economic recovery. The agency coined 4 words. A diamond is forever. It remains the most successful piece of behavioral engineering in capitalist history. By linking a carbon crystal to the concept of eternal devotion, they achieved an economic miracle. They convinced the consumer that a diamond is an investment, but simultaneously convinced them never to sell it. If a diamond is forever, returning it to the secondary market is an insult to the relationship. This effectively removed millions of carats from the supply pool permanently. It was pure market design, the illusion of scarcity backed by relentless cultural conditioning. This model functioned flawlessly until the 21st century. Engineers in Silicon Valley and China perfected chemical vapor deposition. By placing a tiny diamond seed in a vacuum chamber, pumping in carbon-rich gases and heating it to plasma temperatures, the carbon atoms stack onto the seed. The diamond grows. It is not synthetic in the way cubic zirconia is synthetic. It is a diamond. The labs began producing gem-quality stones and pricing them at 30 to 40% below the cost of natural stones. De Beers faced a mathematical certainty. If a consumer cannot tell the difference, the premium evaporates. The monopoly had to change the rules of the game before the game destroyed them.
Inside the executive boardrooms, the calculus was cold and pragmatic. You cannot sue a fundamental law of chemistry. You cannot buy up every plasma reactor in Shenzhen and Silicon Valley.
If you cannot stop the proliferation of lab-grown diamonds, your only option is to commoditize them. In 2018, De Beers launched a new company called Lightbox. The strategy was entirely built on weaponized price discrimination. They did not market Lightbox to brides. They marketed it to teenagers and young professionals looking for weekend accessories. The branding was deliberately unserious: pastel colors, smiling models, and casual clothes. But the real weapon was the pricing structure. At the time, competitors in the lab-grown space were trying to maintain high margins. A lab-grown startup might sell a one-carat stone for $4,000, positioning it as a smart, eco-friendly alternative to a natural stone. Lightbox shattered that floor overnight. They introduced a flat, linear pricing model: $800 per carat. A half carat was $400. A 2 carat was $1,600. They charged the same price for pink and blue stones, which are astronomically expensive in nature. Crucially, Lightbox refused to issue independent grading certificates for their stones. In the natural diamond trade, the grading report from an institute like the GIA is the deed of trust. It verifies the color, cut, clarity, and carat weight. It is the document that makes the stone an investment. By refusing to grade Lightbox stones, De Beers was sending a clear signal to the market. These are not serious objects. You do not need a certificate for a cheap pair of earrings. The motive was containment. De Beers was willing to operate Lightbox at a minimal profit, perhaps even a loss in the early days, to establish an anchor price in the consumer mind. If the undisputed authority on diamonds says a lab-grown stone is only worth $800, how can a competitor justify charging $4,000? The scorched earth tactic worked exactly as intended against the suppliers. The wholesale price of lab-grown diamonds went into freefall. Profit margins for the Silicon Valley upstarts were obliterated. Dozens of heavily funded synthetic diamond companies burned through their venture capital and vanished. De Beers had successfully engineered a price crash. They had driven the lab-grown market into the dirt. The executives believed they had built the psychological firewall. They believed the consumer would look at the $800 lab stone, classify it as costume jewelry, and return to paying $10,000 for a natural engagement ring. They misunderstood the psychology of the modern buyer.
The trap was set, and the enemy was bleeding out. But in economics, a falling price rarely stops exactly where you want it to. As the wholesale cost of lab-grown diamonds plummeted, a fatal domino effect began at the retail counter. Independent jewelers across America, the foot soldiers of the diamond industry, looked at the new math. A jeweler might make a 30% margin on a natural diamond. On a $10,000 stone, they pocket $3,000. But moving a $10,000 natural stone takes time. It requires financing, insurance, and waiting for the right buyer. Meanwhile, the wholesale cost of lab-grown stones had dropped so low because of the Lightbox effect that jewelers could buy a massive, flawless lab-grown diamond for a few $100s and sell it for $3,000. The absolute dollar margin was similar, but the velocity of sales was explosive. Young couples walked into stores asking for natural diamonds. The jeweler would place a 1-carat natural stone next to a spectacular 3-carat lab-grown stone. The price tag was identical. The jeweler, incentivized by fast turnover and high percentage margins, quietly shifted from defending natural diamonds to aggressively pushing lab-grown ones. The firewall De Beers tried to build between fashion jewelry and bridal rings collapsed instantly. Consumers did not care about the lack of a billion-year geological history. They cared about the size of the rock on their finger. The cannibalization accelerated. By 2023, the unthinkable happened. The market share of lab-grown diamonds in the engagement ring sector crossed 50% in the United States. De Beers had successfully commoditized the lab-grown stone, but in doing so, they commoditized the concept of the diamond itself. The psychological barrier evaporated. When a consumer sees a flawless diamond selling for $800, the aura of the $10,000 stone sitting next to it begins to fade. The natural diamond no longer looks like an investment. It looks like a ripoff. The blowback hit the natural supply chain with devastating force. In Surat, India, where 90% of the world's natural diamonds are cut and polished, factories fell silent. Inventory piled up in vaults. De Beers, attempting to stabilize the market and stop the bleeding, was forced to drastically cut the prices of their natural rough diamonds. In the category of selectables, the specific type of rough stones that yield typical engagement rings,
De Beers slashed prices by nearly 40% in a single year. It was a complete capitulation. The firebrand had effectively poisoned the water supply. By attempting to use price as a weapon to degrade the substitute, De Beers accidentally revealed the artificial nature of their own product. They proved to the entire world that a diamond is just a matrix of carbon that can be priced at whatever the manufacturer decides. The monopoly that spent a century carefully managing the illusion of extreme scarcity was now drowning in a flood of infinite supply. The price correction whipped through the entire ecosystem, crushing polishers, miners, and retailers, sparing no one in the supply chain.
Walk into any suburban pawn shop or estate jeweler today with a natural diamond engagement ring purchased in 2019 for $12,000. Slide it across the glass counter. The offer that comes back will likely be under $2,000. The secondary market for diamonds, always a closely guarded secret of the industry, is currently in a state of absolute collapse. The illusion of the diamond as a store of value has been permanently shattered. This is the ultimate consequence of artificial scarcity. When a market is built entirely on narrative rather than strict utility, it only survives as long as the story remains uncontested. De Beers built an empire on the premise that value is derived from origin. A stone pulled from the earth possesses a metaphysical premium. But they fundamentally miscalculated the threshold of human pragmatism. When the visual output is mathematically identical and the price discrepancy crosses a factor of 10, the metaphysical premium disappears. The consumer simply chooses the larger stone. The Lightbox strategy will be studied in business schools as a catastrophic misfire of market design. De Beers tried to use aggressive price signaling to contain a disruptive technology, forgetting that price is a two-way communication channel. By declaring that a perfect carbon crystal is only worth $800, they did not just devalue the laboratory, they devalued the mine. They stripped the diamond of its mythology and reduced it to its base material. A century of brilliant, manipulative, world-building marketing was undone by a combination of microwave plasma and corporate hubris.